Today we're doing Mercedes W208 rear brake pads. My rotors are fine, they're almost perfect. I'm embarrassed to admit how low I've let my pads go. I've had them for months, I just haven't had a chance to replace them. And they've gotten down to about 1 millimeter in thickness. And I'm going to be replacing them with ceramic pads because ceramic performs better. And it won't make all that nasty black brake dust all over the place. But they haven't they haven't worn out the rotors. These pads were good. They didn't wear out the rotors, so there's no problem, and I don't need to replace the rotors. So just remove the wheel, placed it obviously up on jack stands, and you don't need to remove the caliper. There's just simply 2 pins here. There's one here and one here that go through, and you can see where they hold the pads in through those 2 holes. Most Mercedes are pretty much the same. And unless your piston's actually seized or something, all you gotta do is tap the pins out and replace the pads. There's a little spring clip in the middle, but other than that, I've lubed the 2 pins. So I'm simply going to, oh, these are nice and easy. Tap those out. Just using a small screwdriver to chase them out the hole the rest of the way. Hey. Then simply pull the pins out from the back. Come on. More. And that's the 2 pins that hold the pads in. Spring clip on top, goes either way, and simply slide the pads back and to make a little bit of room in there. I have to pry a tiny bit on the, just using an old screwdriver that isn't too big for a pry bar. That should pry back on the, look at that pad, pretty bad. Well, it's got what, 2 millimeters left on it? Could be much worse. Oh. This sucker is a little... Huh. Let me get a pair of pliers, I'll be back in a minute. Turn off camera. Turn off. Okay, I just pulled the other pad out where I dropped it. Crap, with a pair of pliers. Make that sucker out. And then you really have to retract the pistons. There's a dual piston, there's one on each side. It's not like a regular caliper. And you're gently going to pry, make sure you're not prying against the rubber boot of the piston. And just push gently until the piston is retracted back in. And you're going to do that on both sides. And when you do that, one generally pops out and the other one comes back. I wasn't even thinking when I did it, because I'm having a brain fart day. I should have put something in there to keep it from retracting all the way. I should have kept... Anyway, I didn't. I need a regular... Now I need a sharp screwdriver so I can get in there. Hold on one second. Okay, now I've got a screwdriver, a large screwdriver with a sharper tip, and again I'm going to pry not against the rotor, but away from the rotor. I want to retract that. That piston is tough to get in. It is not wanting to go. I don't want to put too much force on it. Okay, I'm going to have to actually remove the... I'm going to take the caliper off so I can retract them with a... This one's a little sticky, so I'm going to retract it with a C-clamp. You generally shouldn't have to do this, but again, I'm not the original owner of this car. I haven't touched the rear brakes on it yet. And again, I let them get a little too far, so the piston came out too far, and it doesn't want to retract back in properly. You can't really really get it from the other side to push in properly. I don't want to do any damage to the rotor. I don't want to scratch up the rotor. So I'm going to pull the caliper off, which is no big deal, back in 2 seconds. Okay, if you have to remove the caliper, it's held on with two 16mm bolts. One that you see the wrenches on. That's the lower bolt, and the upper bolt is... already loosened the upper bolt. I was checking the size. So it's merely two 16mm bolts. Pull those out and back. I apologize for starting to lose light here. It's only 4 in the afternoon, but it's winter time. And so I got the two 16mm bolts out. I'm just going to slip the caliper off and compress the pads with a C-clamp. Now we'll come over there. That's to compress the pads. Compress the pistons. Yeah, just need to get past that first little hump where it's pushed out too far, and now it's just easily going back in. It's not seized or anything. And of course, when you push one in, the other comes out, which is always fun. So you just go back and forth pushing them in until eventually they'll both stay flush with the bores, with the piston bores. I'm just going to push this one in, and then I'll push that one in, back and forth, back in 1 minute once those are back in. Okay, so both pistons are pushed back into the bores, and we can slip the caliper back on. Now the two caliper bolts originally had Loctite on them, thread locker from the factory. So I'm going to reapply blue thread locker to them, put the bolts back in, and torque them to 40 foot-pounds, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's 40 foot-pounds. So I'll put those two in, and again, no reason to watch me do that. I'm just putting two bolts in, torque them down back in 3-4 minutes. Okay, starting to lose the light, I know. Where are we? Okay, so we've torqued down to 40 foot-pounds. Brake pads are the same. The inners and outers are the exact same. I put a little bit of synthetic brake grease on the back where it's going to touch up the piston, and obviously pad side toward the rotor. Slip them both in. Take your spring clip. It's shaped like a W. The little openings should be facing upward, because that's where the pins go through. So that centers in there. And I've taken my pins, cleaned them up on the bench grinder on a wire wheel, and then coated them lightly in an anti-seize. Come on, get through there. And poke that through, and do the same for the bottom one. Where the hell did it go? Apologies for the light, apologies for the weather, but what can you do? And now, I'm certainly going to gently tap them from the back until they're poking out about 1 millimeter in the front, as you can see there. They should be pretty much flush with the back when you're done, when that's and that is it. Wheel back on. Obviously I'm going to take some brake cleaner, spray some brake cleaner on here to clean any fingerprints and stuff up. But yeah, that is about all I can think of on the back brakes.